What if one of the greatest Muslim philosophers wasn't truly a believer? What if the man who shaped both Islamic and Western philosophy, the same, Avicenna, who influenced Thomas Aquinas, Descartes, and Spinoza, secretly doubted the very God he wrote about? Was Ibn Sina, the prince of physicians and master of logic, a true Muslim sage, or a hidden heretic disguised beneath layers of metaphysics? Tonight, we dive into a question that has haunted historians and theologians for centuries. Was Avicenna a faithful believer or an atheist in disguise? Before your answer, remember this. He wrote of the necessary existent, spoke the language of revelation, yet his God seemed more like Aristotle's prime mover than Allah of the Quran. Was this mere philosophical sophistication or quiet rebellion? Born in 980 CE in Avicenna, near Bukhara, a land of scholars, mystics and poets, Ibn Sina, or Avicenna to the west, grew up in an Islamic golden age vibrating with intellectual ambition. He memorized the Quran by 10, mastered logic and medicine by 16, and by 18 he had already cured the Sultan. But behind the brilliance lay a restless mind, one that refused to accept inherited truths. In his autobiography, Avicenna confesses that he struggled for years with the problem of metaphysics until he found clarity in Aristotle's Metaphysics. It wasn't revelation that saved him, it was reason. Avicenna's idea of God begins not with scripture, but with logic. He starts by asking, why does anything exist at all? Every single thing we can imagine. A tree, a planet, a person could just as easily not exist. Its existence depends on something else, and that something else depends on another cause, and another, until reason demands an ultimate explanation, something that exists by necessity, not by chance. That, Avicenna says, is God, the necessary existent, a being whose essence is existence. He cannot not exist. But here's where Avicenna's vision becomes radically different from orthodox theology. In Islam, God is personal. He creates by will, speaks through revelation, and acts with mercy. He chooses when to create, whom to guide, and how to judge. For Avicenna, this language of divine will and choice doesn't make sense in a perfectly necessary being. If God's essence is existence itself, then everything that flows from him must also flow necessarily. Creation isn't an act of decision, it's an act of being. Just as the sun cannot help but shine, the necessary existent cannot help but emanate existence. The world, therefore, is not a product of divine choice, but the inevitable consequence of divine reality. To theologians, this was deeply unsettling. If God cannot choose not to create, then where is his freedom? Where is his compassion, his judgment, his personal relationship with humanity? They accused Avicenna of turning God into a cold metaphysical principle, an abstract source of being rather than a living, willing creator. To them, his God was not Allah of the Quran, but a shadow of Aristotle's eternal prime mover. Yet to Avicenna, it was the opposite. He believed he was giving faith a stronger foundation, grounding belief in logic, so firm that no doubt could shake it. He wanted a God who could not be denied by reason, a God whose existence was not a matter of faith, but of necessity. And so, in trying to defend God through reason, Avicenna created a paradox that would echo through centuries of philosophy. A God who must exist, yet cannot choose. A creator who sustains all things, yet is untouched by the world he creates. To understand how bold Avicenna's thought was, we have to look at what he said about prophecy. In traditional Islam, a prophet is someone chosen by God, a human who receives revelation through divine command, through the words of an angel, through inspiration sent from beyond this world. It's a sacred mystery, not something that can be explained by reason alone. But Avicenna saw prophecy differently. He believed that prophecy was not a supernatural interruption of nature, but rather the highest and rarest expression of human nature itself. In his view, every human being has an intellect, a power to think, to know, and to connect with truth. Most people, he said, use only a small part of that potential, but a few extraordinary souls possess an intellect so pure, so perfectly balanced, that they can connect directly with the active intellect, a kind of cosmic mind that radiates knowledge into the human world. When that happens, the person receives truths instantly. Without study or reasoning, they see universal truths, moral laws, and even visions of the unseen. This, Avicenna said, is what happens in the mind of a prophet. So for him, prophecy was not a miracle sent from outside. It was a natural process unfolding from within. The prophet in Avicenna's philosophy is the perfect philosopher, the one whose intellect and imagination are united in absolute harmony. He not only understands truth, he can translate it into images, parables, and laws that ordinary people can grasp. That's why prophets speak in stories and symbols, while philosophers speak in logic and proofs. Both, Avicenna said, point toward the same truth, they just express it differently. To the theologians, however, this was shocking. If prophecy is merely a natural gift, where is God's will? Where is revelation, the sacred word sent from heaven? They accused Avicenna of reducing divine communication to psychology and intellect, stripping it of its holy mystery. But to Avicenna, he wasn't denying prophecy, he was explaining it. He believed that understanding how prophecy works does not make it less divine. It only shows that the divine operates through the very nature of the human mind. In a way, Avicenna's vision makes prophecy both more human and more universal. It suggests that the divine spark lies within us all, waiting to awaken through reason, imagination, and the love of truth. Centuries later, Al-Ghazali would attack Avicenna fiercely in his Incoherence of the Philosophers, accusing him and Alpha-Albi of Kuffour's unbelief for 3 reasons. 1. They denied bodily resurrection. 2. They claimed God knows universals, not particulars. 3. They asserted the eternity of the world. Ghazali declared, they must be branded as unbelievers. And yet, paradoxically, Christian Europe would later canonize Avicenna's ideas. Thomas Aquinas, one of the most influential Christian theologians, borrowed from him to define esse being, an essentia essence. Thus the man condemned as a heretic in the East became a pillar of Christian philosophy in the West. So, was Avicenna truly an atheist? Let's examine the evidence. He prayed, fasted, and often invoked Allah in his writings. Yet his metaphysics reduced God to an abstract necessity, stripped of personality and will. He didn't deny God's existence. He redefined it beyond the boundaries of religious imagination. His God doesn't speak, command, or love. He's existence itself, timeless, necessary, unchanging. To a mystic, that's divine unity. To a theologian, it's heresy. To a philosopher, it's brilliance. If atheism means denying a personal deity, Avicenna was closer to Spinoza than to the Prophet Muhammad. If faith means affirming the divine principle behind all being, then Avicenna was a believer of the highest order. Perhaps the question itself, Muslim or atheist, fails to capture what Avicenna was. He lived at the intersection where faith becomes philosophy, and philosophy becomes metaphysics. Why does this question still echo today? Because it touches a nerve in every age where reason confronts faith. Avicenna reminds us that belief and thought are not enemies, but uneasy companions. That the search for truth may lead one beyond orthodoxy, and yet still toward the divine. Modern thinkers, from Nietzsche to Heidegger, echo the same dilemma. Can we still speak of God after reason dismantles him? Avicenna's courage was not in denying faith, but in reimagining it through the lens of logic. So, who was Ibn Sina? A devout Muslim seeking rational proof for God? A philosopher who secretly replaced God with being itself? Or simply a man suspended between faith and reason, who dared to think the unthinkable? Perhaps Avicenna's real message was this, that the divine is not a matter of belief, but of intelligibility, the way being itself makes sense. And maybe, in the silence between theology and logic, lies the place where Avicenna still whispers to us, do not fear reason, for it too is a path to the divine.